Hi, Özlem. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, I hear.
Hello?
Yeah, I hear. Hello, Rokio, right?
Hi. Hi, Özlem. Hello again. Hi, Karen. We made it. Wait a second, because I'm having volumes off. Okay. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for setting this up. That's fantastic.
I don't know how we did it, but we did it. And actually,
Well done. No, thank you.
YouTube.
Thank you. Shame, you guys must be really hectically busy. First day of any conference is wild.
It's crazy. You know what is crazy? Because we are doing it online and offline, and that's kind of disadvantage.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's great to be experimenting and trying new things, but I think that's hard, really hard. But yeah, do we have a waiting room set up for this, or we just let everybody come in when they arrive?
Yeah, just 1 second to silence this one. Okay. Tell me, Karen, what would you ask me if we have some room to wait?
Yeah, can we set up a waiting room? I see people are already starting to come in.
Yeah, I suggest, because we schedule the conference 3:15, and Juan asked us if we want to go live already at 3. So,
Okay.
So basically, when you three are together, I can start introducing you. And the most important thing that I settled, that YouTube is live right now, but I'm not still recording it. Okay. So after 3, I will start recording.
Okay,
So
but we're only going to start at 15:15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just
Is
for
that
me,
okay?
I was thinking maybe we start a little bit earlier, because I'm seeing the people are getting inside and outside just to check, so they don't wait. But however, whenever we are ready, we can start.
Okay, I hear you. Let's see, Alex is connecting.
Perfect.
Oh, his connection is very slow.
How are you?
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I feel you've managed this very well. So thank you very much, because
We were all like in panic. Me too. I was like, is this gonna happen or not?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just been a difficult day.
No, we are there. We are there. Perfect. Okay, Karen is here. Alex is here.
Yep.
I'm going to check if I can present. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay, I will do a little bit of introduction, if you don't mind, just before we start. We'll do recording here. Okay. Okay, you don't mind, I'm start recording it. And we are live at YouTube, so anyone can see us.
Okay.
Okay.
No pressure.
Thank you so much for being here with me. We are in the middle of a forum of education and training in social enterprises. And I'm glad to be connected with Karen Crinch and Alex Bignotti for the moment. And we will talk about teaching cases in this forum, okay? We are co-hosted by Publishing House. We are waiting for Juliet to arrive, and we will be talking about using teaching cases in classroom, publishing through teaching cases, and writing teaching cases. We have 3 experts, so I believe they will host you good and answer all your questions and doubts, and it will be interesting forum. So guys, who would like to start?
I'm going to bounce this to Alex, because I think if we can start at 3:15, then I think we're going to have most folk online. But maybe we can get a conversation going in the meantime. That's informal. I don't know, Alex, what do you think?
Yes, also because I don't know how many people are connected to YouTube already.
I will just check to tell you this information about YouTube. Right now on the chat is only me and 3 people is watching now.
Okay, perhaps we can, in the first few minutes after 3:15, we could let them know about this link. They can also join us in this meeting and ask live questions, but we will also take questions from the YouTube chat box. All right, so, well, welcome everybody. I don't know if we should talk now, or I know we've gone live very early. So people are supposed to come at 3:15. How much should we entertain them now? Or?
We are right now here in Spain in the middle of lunchtime. So probably most of the people are connected, but maybe having a lunch or something similar. But the important thing is I'm recording you and we are live on YouTube. So, and there is a link directly that is connecting us with the platform, with Meet app. So they will be able to, whenever they wish, to join and see us.
All right.
All is recorded.
Well, my TV host skills that haven't been tested before, but I can try. All right, so I'm Alex Dignotti. I'm based at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And with Karen and Prof. Philip de Burla from KU Leuven, we set up a project in 2017, which is meant to advance the field of social entrepreneurship in South Africa specifically, but over time we saw how people from other African countries are also connecting to this project. So the project has a big community component, let's say. We've created this community called ANSYS, African Network of Social Entrepreneurship Scholars. And we're currently about 180 members. This community focuses on basically advancing the field in this continent, but really behind the field are people. And what do people need to advance the field of social entrepreneurship? Well, to be connected to each other. So we basically trying to connect people through this project, and hence why we have this community. We've had a few workshops. The first 2, we were blessed to be able to have them in person. One was in 2018 and one in 2019 at the University of Pretoria, where we came together to, we had a bit of a doctoral workshop component, and then sharing research agendas and the like. So that was very good, I think, to get us connected in person at the outset. And then we've been growing this network over time. So that's the research components. We've been making available some funds for like editing of manuscripts or conference attendance. So we're trying to help people with their research in terms of giving them opportunities to showcase the research, and as well to connect each other and know what each other are doing, so that we can collaborate together. And then there's also the teaching component. So this webinar fits into that. We partnered with Emerald to run a special case collection on teaching cases on social entrepreneurship in Africa, which I think is the 2nd edition. And then we've got quite a number of good cases. I believe 7 of them are published. And this is to help us to have relevant material in the classroom, which is not borrowed from other contexts, but that we can relate to. Yes, so yeah, today precisely we just wanted to share our experience being guest editors on this special case collection, helping people to be aware that there is this special issue and how to use teaching cases effectively in the classrooms, but also how to publish these cases, because they are research outputs, at least in our context. They're considered accredited publications. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity as well to publish, which perhaps many people don't think about or they're not aware of. And on the teaching front, we will also solicit a contribution to teaching materials, we have this website where we showcase everything we do. It's answers.org.za. Answers is ANSES.org.za, where we will have open access to some teaching materials. So we ask all of you who are teaching social entrepreneurship in this context to contribute to slides, the videos you use, your teaching plans, and then we'll all share them on the website. Now, my mouth is running dry, so perhaps Karen can also help me with these introductions.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. It was very informative. Actually, I believe most of our viewers are interested in how to publish these teaching case studies. And what was your experience? Was it difficult? Usually people are maybe kind of off. I don't know about teaching case studies, how I should do that. Maybe I'm a teacher as well, and then how to relate myself with the students, how to use this data that we can have and then provide some useful research. What is your opinion, the most difficult when facing publishing teaching cases?
I think it's a very different way of writing. So if we come from a position of I'm used to publishing research in accredited journals, what often happens is we don't have that storytelling sort of mind or cap on, and we need to put it on. So a teaching case is a lot of storytelling, where we very craftily sort of bring to life a real life scenario with good storytelling, but it also links to theory. So that's where it can become a bit difficult for it not to be too dry. It needs to be well organized as well, and bring to life the dilemma, the managerial dilemma that the protagonist is going through. But we'll talk more about this. And also, of course, there needs to be learning objectives, which we keep in mind as we write that story. We need to also think, what do we want the students to walk away with? It's not just knowledge of this story, this managerial story, but also a better understanding of the field or the theories that we want to teach through the case. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Karen, would you like
Yeah,
to
thanks,
continue?
Alex. I know we're only starting in 15 minutes, but it's really nice to have some folk online. So I thought it might be a nice chance to get people to introduce themselves. So I've started a quick chat in the chat, but I don't know how many people are actually at their computers and want to put their cameras on and just tell us who they are, where they are, and how they are, I suppose. So if you want to have a go, I see Juliet it's good to see her. She's just joined us from the UK. Baraka, do you want to give us some background, who you are, where you are, and how you are?
Sure. Hello, can you hear me all?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I am sitting in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. My background is I'm an entrepreneur, but a computer science graduate. I run an ISP called Uhuru One, which is basically similar to RAIN in South Africa, but very small. We provide internet to universities, and that was my inland into teaching. We're giving back. So I'm really interested in how I could actually do more. Our company is basically a social enterprise. We do connectivity, but we actually connect a lot of schools for free and universities. And I got to know about this program through EDHE, the South African one, which I had spoke last year as a presenter. So I was very interested and I signed up, and I'm looking forward to sharing and learning from you guys all.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Baraka. Selena, I see you're down in Australia. I say down because we're in South Africa. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, what time is it and how are you?
It's 5 past midnight. And it's the Monday of a long weekend. So I was just up getting ready for the week. So it was good timing. I've just left academia, but I've just taken on a role as the head of Enactus in Australia. Enactus develops education programs around social innovation and entrepreneurship for university students. So I'm kind of stepping out of doing it for one uni and now into doing it for all of our universities across Australia, which is great. I think it was interesting hearing Alex talk about the difference between writing purely academically and writing case studies, particularly in social impact. And I got a couple of grants a while back to write some. So I've done all the interviews for 15 different social enterprises, and I now need to write the case studies up. And I suppose for me, the video interviews were so good. I'm thinking that I'd prefer to have them as video case studies and then to produce some written work around it with the theory in it. So I'm looking at different formats that could be used. And I thought this was a really interesting sounding event. So that's why I'm here.
That's fantastic. It's really good to see you, and thank you for staying up so late. I have to say,
Yes.
past midnight, even on a long weekend, feels late. Ishara, you're in Cape Town. Are you at your PC? Thank you for your
Yes,
introduction.
hi from Cape Town. Very windy today. Yes, so like you, Karen, I'm trying very hard to wrap up a PhD. And I've been studying women entrepreneurs in our township communities and looking at how they develop their sort of founder identity. And I mean, prior to being a PhD student, I actually wrote a novel. So I'm more of a storyteller than an academic. So I'm looking forward to learning more about writing case studies. I think I would probably enjoy it more than writing academic papers. And yeah, I think I am a member of ANSYS, so that's how I'm here.
I think we all want to know what your novel was about.
Oh, it was just a fictional story about South African Indian girls navigating their way to university, and there was a bit of mythical realism thrown in there for good measure. So it wasn't great, but it was on my bucket list. So
amazing.
Wow, well done.
thanks.
Well, then the PhD should be easy, right? Yeah. I see. I'm just going to pick names from so apologies for the folk on YouTube, but Tamara is keeping an eye on your comments in the YouTube chat, so thank you. Willie, do you want to give us an introduction? I can see you've got a fantastic shirt on in your Zoom picture.
That's an old picture, so yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Willie. I'm from the University of Fort Hare in the Eastern Cape, and excited to be here. I noticed some familiar faces. Great to see everybody. And I am more interested in how to write case studies, especially now that I've been working with a number of social enterprises. So I'm interested in the skill of actually writing that, which is a different skill altogether from the journal writing we usually do. So I am hoping that I'll benefit a lot from this cohort.
Nice to see you, Willie. Clavis, are you there? It'd be great to see you and say hello.
Hi, Karen.
How are you, Clavis? Good to see you.
I'm very well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm well. Do you want to say hello to everybody? Tell us where you are, who you are, and how you are.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Clavis Fuba, a PhD student at the University of Pretoria. Yeah, so I work with ANSYS as the project coordinator. I work with Dr. Alex. Yeah, so sorry, my video, so I'm researching immigrant entrepreneurs in South Africa, but then my master's dissertation was in social entrepreneurship, social impact measurement. So we're actually trying to revise a framework the Hive map that was developed by Diane Hort and David Littlewood. So we were actually trying to revise it to bring in
Oh, we're losing you, Clavis.
yeah,
Okay,
so
but it's good to see you. Well, sort of see you. I see you've got Michelle, who we haven't seen for a while. Michelle, are you able to say hello?
Hello. Yeah,
Long
I'm
time.
here. Yeah, I'm in Uganda. I'm Michelle Chichoncho. I lecture at Mackay University Business School, and I'm a doctoral student. And it's from ANSES that I was able to draw my topic, and it focuses on tourism social enterprises. And it is interesting, and I hope to learn more about teaching cases from this workshop. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Michelle. Mr. Nguyen, Hang Nguyen, am I butchering your name? I'm sorry. Don't say hello. Who are you? How are you? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Sorry to not turn on the camera. I have some issue with my eyes, so I look terrible now. So yeah, I am an assistant professor in social and sustainable business models in EDC Paris Business School in Paris, France. And the reason why I'm here today is because it's my research focus, and I also really care about how to write, how to teach, how to use case study. Because in 2 days is my first course on sustainability at my school, so it really is interesting for me.
Fantastic. Well, it's good to have you. And how do we say your name? Sorry.
My name can call by my first name, Hong.
Hong.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's lovely. Who else can I draw on? I appreciate that I am pulling out names on my screen, but Nielke, are you there? Sipe, I see you. Want to pop your cameras on and say hello if you can.
Hi, I'm Nielke Duplessis. I'm a colleague of Alex. I'm working from home today. Hi, Alex. I'm lecturing communication management with Alex in the business management department. But I'm also very interested in social enterprises since I teach corporate social responsibility and development communication. And we had a brief discussion this morning as I was passing Alex's office, and he was very busy with this, preparing for this workshop, on the whole idea of social entrepreneurship and social purpose organizations, which seems to be one of the terms which are developing at the moment, and how non-profit organizations seem to be more migrating towards social entrepreneurship and social purpose organizations in the current environment where it's becoming more and more difficult to find donors and fundraising is becoming an issue. So I'm actually here because I'm fascinated with the topic. Thank you very much.
Great to see you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We've got a few more minutes before we hit 1:15. Melande Busquet, did I say your name properly? Do you want to say hello?
Yes, of course. Not sure if video and audio is working. Nice to meet you all. Thanks so much for this invitation.
Who you are, where you are, and how you are is how we're doing our hellos. Do you want to tell us where you are? It's good to see you.
Definitely, sure. So my name is Milane Busquet. I'm a PhD researcher actually from Utrecht University, which is in the Netherlands. I'm working on social entrepreneurship for my thesis, and I'm teaching on social entrepreneurship as well. So I'm very curious for this webinar.
It's fantastic to have you. Thank you for joining us from the Netherlands. Last one, Seham Galwash, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you now. ANSES is very important for me when it comes to cases and research and everything that's related to social entrepreneurship. Actually, I'm from Egypt, and I'm working at the American University in Cairo. And I am really interested in the field of social entrepreneurship. in terms of research and writing cases. So I am sure that I will learn a lot from today's session, and it's really good to see you all here.
That's fantastic. Great. Before I hand over to Alex to officially welcome us all for our 3:15 start, or 3:15 South African time, it's my name, I suppose. I'll take this quick opportunity. I'm Karen. I am with ANSYS. I'm with Emerald as an associate editor. I'm a long-suffering PhD student. It never seems to end. And I work in social entrepreneurship. So I bring a number of different hats. And it's a real pleasure and privilege to have you all with us, and to also have Juliet with us from Emerald. I see that there's a couple of name numbers on our screen. So if I can ask A0063107, you sound like a flight number. If you could just type in the chat who you are so we can call you by your name and not by your flight number, that would be fantastic. It is officially 3:15, so I am going to hand over to our lead, Alex, who will begin with the kind of formal event and our discussion today on social entrepreneurship. So over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks for entertaining our audience. So welcome everybody to this webinar on teaching cases. We gave a bit of an introduction early on, but for having everybody up to speed, well, let me introduce myself again. I'm Alex Vignotti. I'm at the Department of Business Management at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. I specialize in social entrepreneurship, and I head this community and project on social entrepreneurship in Africa, which is called ANSYS, the African Network of Social Entrepreneurship Scholars. And in this network, in this community, we try to connect all the scholars that are doing work on social entrepreneurship in Africa. And we also try to bring you some opportunities to develop your research skills, your teaching skills, to know more about social entrepreneurship, be connected to international conversations as well, by participating in different conferences and so on. Well, so more concretely regarding teaching cases, we partnered with Emerald to run a special issue on cases on social entrepreneurship in Africa. We've got, I believe, about 7 cases published now, and more that will be published soon. Juliet will give you a quick rundown later on, but basically we've developed quite a bit of exposure and experience on teaching cases from the editorial point of view. So we thought, why don't we share all this experience, even though it's not very extensive, with the public. Perhaps a lot of you guys don't use teaching cases much in the classroom, or you have opportunities to publish these cases, but you haven't really, you don't know how to navigate space. So today, what we're trying to do today is basically to give you a bit more of an inside perspective into publishing teaching cases and using them as well for teaching. As you'll see, we kept this quite at a broad level, even though we go down some details here and there, because we also want to have a conversation. So please feel free to pose questions as we go along, and I will ask Tamara, please, if keeping an eye on the chat, or Karen keep an eye on this chat, and Tamara is keeping an eye on the YouTube channel chat. You can sort of hint me to stop, or we can stop each other to take questions, especially when we change presenters. So there will be 3 people presenting. I'll hand it over to Karen first, then I'll go myself, and at the end Juliet will speak from the Emerald Publishing point of view as well. Have I covered everything, Karen? Anything I should add? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. And just, Alex, if I can just jump into just a reminder to just keep your mics on mute when the conversation is happening. That's great. And if you want to ask questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we will definitely keep an eye out for as many questions as we can.
All right, thank you very much. Karen, are you ready to go first? Sure.
Can you all see my fantastic cover page?
We can.
Yes.
Yes, it's highly visual. I've spent hours on the graphics. All right, so the session today is to really give you, as Alex has said, a high-level introduction into teaching cases, to answer questions. So the goal is to be very interactive and to please ask. It is very much an open platform to ask questions and around social entrepreneurship and how that links to teaching cases. My presentation, which I will try and keep quite short, is focusing on a couple of key issues around teaching cases, which is what are they, why are they great for teaching social entrepreneurship in the classroom, but also why are they useful to us as a research tool and as another avenue for publishing. I've got the best task of all because I get to engage in this at a high level, and Juliet from Emerald is with us today to also answer some of those nitty-gritty processes on the publishing process, how it works, who, publishing through this is in this context almost the Emerald Emerging Market Case Collection, but really just some of those finer nuanced details around publications and how to do that, how you submit your case. Why am I teaching to you today? Well, as I said right at the beginning of our chat, I wear a number of different hats. I work quite extensively in the social entrepreneurship field from a practice perspective. I am, as we were all talking about earlier, a long-suffering PhD student in the field, but I'm also an associate editor for the Emerald Emerging Markets Case Collection with a specific focus on social entrepreneurship, trying to encourage us to get more cases written on social entrepreneurship. And then I also teach it. So I teach on our MBA program in our business school. So I'm able to bring together a lot of these threads to hopefully make some sense of it and lessen some of the barriers to make it easier for you to write cases, publish cases, but also to use teaching cases in the classroom. So let's dive in. I've only got a couple of slides, so hopefully I won't be too long, which is always famous last words, right? Trying to get more cases written on social entrepreneurship. Great. And then also teach it. So I teach on our MBA program in our business school. So I'm able to bring together a lot of these threads. Tomorrow, that's the YouTube channel coming through. Some of the barriers to make it easier for you to write cases. Can I ask that everybody just check that their mics are muted for me, please? There we go. That's fantastic. Thanks. Sorry. This hybrid format is a whole new learning journey in itself. Okay, so what is a teaching case?
Karen, just a second. Sorry, Karen, just in a case that you hear double voices, it's probably because your micro on YouTube is up, okay? So if you notice this thing happening, just go, if your YouTube is open in the same time or everybody else can turn off the mic. But when you're speaking, you just check your YouTube. If your YouTube is on, should be silent to don't double the voices, okay?
Thanks, Tamara, appreciate it. And it's great to have Tamara's support here. Tamara's been working frantically behind the scenes to help set things up for today's session. Right, so what is a teaching case? So the most important thing about a teaching case is that this is an academic package of materials. There is a story, and underneath the story is what we call a teaching note. The teaching case is what the students see. This is the story. And so I've got a picture here of Coven. Coven is a social entrepreneur. This is a case that I wrote a couple of years ago in 2016. Coven runs the Brian Holden Institute. So the teaching case tells the story of Coven. Generally, you will interview Coven and people around him, and you will write the story. It's written in an interesting and engaging way, remembering that your audience for the teaching case is your students. So you need to bring them in, you need to describe Coven, tell them what he's like, where is he from, what is it that he's doing. But the most important thing about the teaching case is that there is this dilemma, this unsolvable problem that Coven has. And like any good Netflix series that ends kind of the first episode when you kind of have to know what happens next. So you go to the second episode and next thing it's the next morning. This is the response that we want in our teaching case. This terrible dilemma that Coven can't solve how can he solve it? And this is when you as the lecturer step in and you kind of send the students off to go and problem solve as if they are Coven. So in this particular example, Coven is running the Brian Holden Institute, and he's battling with this tension between profit and purpose. They provide public eye health in a huge number of very poor countries where eye health care is non-existent. And they fund this work through any of you wearing contact lenses. The Brian Holden Institute actually is one of the leading companies in the world developing technology that goes into your contact lenses. So you can see the hybrid model here. That is a classic social enterprise. But there is a dilemma in that Coven is the newly appointed CEO. What should he do? Does he get drawn to profit, and he gets drawn to purpose? And so you can see how the story unravels. And this is where, as the lecturer, you send the student off to really unpack, discover, and apply their learnings. Can I just ask everyone to check those mute buttons again? To apply the whatever lesson it is that you want them to take from the classroom. So this is why I say that the teaching case is actually a pack of materials. It's not just the story, because underneath the teaching case is this incredible thing called the teaching note. Now, the teaching note is a very academic document. It is your pedagogy, to use these big teaching words. It's the teaching guide, which is also written by the team who submit the teaching case. And in here, you draw from your Bloom's taxonomy. What is it that you want? What are your learning outcomes? What do you want students to leave the classroom with? And then you write out a teaching plan that is very detailed. It says, this is the theory that you would like the students to learn. This is why it's important for them to understand, and this is how you think that how you think the lecturer should teach it. You have to put this hat on as if the person who will be teaching based on the lessons in your teaching note has never done this before. And so it's really helpful to go into nice detail with board plans or diagrams or worksheets, assignment questions. These are the teaching note really is an incredible research document, because it applies theory, but it's also a great teaching tool. And this is one of the things that makes that I really love about teaching cases, is that the art of writing a teaching case makes you a better teacher, because you have to take your research knowledge from your interviews, if you're doing qualitative research, and write it into the story. But at the same time, you also need to think very deeply as to what are those learning outcomes and what is the lesson that you want students to draw from this. And so not only are teaching cases great to use in the classroom, but they're also great for us as academic professionals if we want to improve our practice, both as storytellers and teachers, but also as people who hold and carry and put across theory. I've got 3 more slides, so I'm just going to jump back to this slide, which I skipped across, because what are the advantages of the teaching case to the social entrepreneurship classroom? So the first advantage is that, and as a PhD student, I can say this with some confidence, which is that I have read so many academic articles that start off with, there's no definition for social entrepreneurship. It's an academically ambiguous field. So how do you teach this when it is academically ambiguous? And this is what's great about the teaching case, is that it allows you to tackle quite complex and dense subjects in an engaging and an enjoyable way, because it brings context into the classroom. And we see this particularly with the Emerald Emerging Markets case collection, where we get applications, and Juliet will talk to this in more detail than I can, but from countries all over the world and from very rich and very diverse contexts. So it's a wonderful way to get students to think outside of their normal. It is also very useful to introduce individual and group work. And I will talk a bit about this in terms of how you teach the teaching case. But you give that teaching case to students, they read it, you then come back to it and you can discuss it in the classroom, and then students can go and problem solve either on their own or in a group. And again, this discussive way of learning is very useful and has proven to be particularly useful in the online environment. And the magic of the teaching case is that they must apply their learnings. It's not enough to just read the textbook and regurgitate the definitions. The dilemma that sits within that teaching case requires students to understand what the problem is, to problem solve through the theory or the knowledge that you as the lecturer have shared in the classroom, to then apply their understanding, test it, and then present it back in the final plenary session or in a final assignment, or however you decide to measure that. But that is one of the great things about the teaching case, is that it is applied learning. And that's why there's a strong focus on Bloom's taxonomy in the teaching note. And students obviously learn from the case, but also from each other in terms of how other people have viewed and interrogated the teaching case and how they can apply that to their circumstances. My last slide is, I tend to do this. I forget what slides I have and then I talk past them, but this is, we will share these slides with the group. But what goes into the teaching note, you can see here, I've given some of the dilemmas that were in the teaching case, how they get fleshed out in the teaching note in terms of some of the theories that can be applied to Coven's dilemma in particular. So for example, that tension between profit and purpose is a great opportunity to really dive into the Smith, Goen, and Vesharov readings, for example, on tensions, or the discussions on hybridity and uncoupling as a strategic response, et cetera, et cetera. You can see where the teaching note can go. Typical formats, as I've said, you give this, the teaching case can be pre-reading. Teaching cases also don't have to just be written. They can be videos, they can happen in short form, they can happen in long form. Juliette will also talk about the illustrated cases that are coming through. Essentially, they are a form of storytelling, but what's crucial to them is the dilemma that's in that teaching case. They're great for open, so you as the lecturer step in and you open the discussion. What did students think? What are the issues? Is Coven a social entrepreneur? Is the Brian Holden Institute a social enterprise? What should he do? And then you get students to break into groups or into individuals to really problem solve the key questions that you've given them. And then you can see how this unravels. They go away, they problem solve, they come up with solutions. There are always red herrings in a teaching case. And that's important to remember when you're writing a teaching case, is include those red herrings. They're really fantastic in the classroom. And then as the lecturer, your chance then is to kind of tease that out. Well, what do you think about that? Should Coven have gone down that rabbit hole? And so you get to test the depth of understanding that students have around the concepts that you want to teach. My last point before I hand back to Alex is that, and this came up actually in the introductions, is that you can see that the teaching case and the teaching note are two very different documents. The teaching case is a story and the teaching note is a rigorous research exercise. And I must say that as an associate editor, one of the best tips that I can give you is to write in pairs, because we have different writing styles, and the academic writing style, which can be quite dry, is very different to the storytelling writing style, which needs to be slightly dramatized. It needs to have energy. It's just got a very different audience. So writing in pairs, highlighting that dilemma for me are two of the crucial things. And I will leave this for Juliette because I'm pretty convinced I'm well over my time. But teaching cases are an important research output. There is a stringent process to publication of peer review, but also they are an important other channel to publication other than through journals. And so I would go back to what I said at the beginning, that I think one of the best things about teaching cases is that they make us better faculty, they make us better academics, and they make us better teachers, because we're able to draw on our research our research, apply that in the classroom, and improve our teaching practice at the same time through the writing of the teaching note. Alex, back to you, and I'll happily answer any questions in the chat or as you see fit, but thank you for the extra time.
Thanks, Karen. I wonder if there are any questions at this point in time before we move on. I'll speak a bit more about bringing theory into the case and the teaching notes. But up to now, any questions?
Looks like we have one from Hung.
Yes, I have a question if you don't mind. Yeah, my question is, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the short and clear presentation. My always question is, when a researcher, a teacher, a lecturer want to publish a case study, they often take it from their research. But it is a dilemma of publishing in academic journals or publishing case study, because many journals, they ask to have that your research is a brand new case study that you never used before or everywhere. But now if you use your research to publish in case study, there will be any problem with academic journals?
I think sorry, go on. Yeah, from my perspective.
No, I was just going to say Juliet.
I think if you were publishing a teaching case in any of our proprietary journals, so that would be the Emerging Markets Case Studies Collection or the Case Journal, we would expect that it wouldn't have been published in any other form elsewhere, or if it had, it would be substantially different. I think we say it has to be over 50% different. So do you mean if it's research that you had published as an academic article already and you were reworking it as a case study?
Sorry, can you please?
So is the question around whether it would be reworking research that you've already published in an academic journal as a case study, or is it that is the criteria different for publishing case studies?
I mean, there's a two sense. I mean that, by example, if I publish somewhere in an academic journals, can I use the case that to publish in a case study, or inversely, if I publish in case study, can I still use that for academic journals? It's always the two cents.
Yeah, so as I said, we would expect it to be substantially different from the original version. I think we say it has to be at least what we would class as 50% different, and we would have a rights team that would kind of manage that process. But teaching cases do tend to be very different in terms of the way that they're written from academic articles. So I think often you can make that case, but because they're so different, sometimes the format doesn't work, it doesn't translate very well. I think that's the only challenge that we find.
If I can speak from an associate editor perspective, I see quite a number of cases that come through based on research that people have done. I think what's important here, and I think it's a very important question, is about strategy. And so your publishing strategy of your data is most likely to be journals first, cases second. And so the case is very different to, the teaching case is very different to any academically published article that you would write. It's not an academic teaching case in that sense. I'm confusing the language here, but it's a story that you're telling, whereas your published journal article is very unlikely to be a story from the ones that I've read. So I think it's a strategy decision that generally what we see is that academics will do a journal article first and then use the data from their interviews to write a case, which is then the story of, the real story from those interviews, and then applies their knowledge to the writing of the teaching note. It's a separate publication. And I completely agree with Juliet, the 50% difference, they are very different creatures, the teaching case and the journal article.
I just want to add a very small and quick comment, that is the 50% significant differences is a very, very qualitative for me. It's not.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe, sorry, Juliet, just to talk over, I must say that I don't think I've seen people publish off it's quite obvious in our conversations that they've used their research to write, from which they write their teaching case, but it is very different to their research. I hear you, it's a subjective 50%, but I personally don't see it coming through that much from an AE perspective. Juliet, sorry to talk with you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, it may be that that's not a helpful statistic. It's just, it's the point that it needs to be substantially different. But as I've said, because of the format of a teaching case is so different than an academic article, that it tends to be substantially different just by its very nature.
I just wanted to add that a teaching case study is not unacademic, it just has a different academic purpose. So I think we get a little bit hung up on whether it has value or not because it's not written like an academic research piece, but it has more value because it isn't, because it's more accessible to the students and more engaging than a normal academic paper would be. You're right. You're writing an academic paper for an academic audience, and you're writing a teaching case study for people who are wanting to learn and engage with the content.
Yeah, and actually increasingly within academia, there's more of a drive for research that has demonstrable impact in the real world. And what has more impact than a teaching case that you can use in the classroom that helps students to do something differently as a result? You know, I think so actually there's more of an appetite for teaching cases than ever in my experience as a publisher.
I would also like to say, perhaps, I don't know if this will speak to your question, but in the first, in the abstract submissions that we had for the special issue, we picked up quite a number of submissions that were case study research. So people thought that a teaching case study is equivalent to case study research, where I have 3-4 organizations that I'm doing research on. I do field observations and interviews, and I'm trying to extrapolate data to then build theory or whatever it is. And so the teaching case study is nothing like that. It's not a research case study. It is a real life case of, in this case, social entrepreneurship. So it would focus on the individual and the company that's at play, and will sort of give, it usually starts with a dilemma, you know, so-and-so is sitting in his office looking over the township, and he's wondering how the social entrepreneurial venture is going to grow. Then we go through the life story of this person, how he started the company, and then to maybe some kind of managerial dilemma like market competition or whatever it is. And then it closes with the way forward. So students will have to now make strategic decisions on, for example, strategy for internationalization or for growth. And as you can see from this example, there's nothing there that would go in a published research article and vice versa. So even though the source of information overlaps, but the output is completely different, I would dare say if you're doing both correctly, there is no risk you're going to plagiarize yourself. Yeah.
And we've got a question from the YouTube channel, which has come through from Tloko, which tomorrow is flagged. Can I just, obviously now I can't find it. What's the best number of participants to interview for a teaching case? Alex?
Well, the best number, I don't know. I think it goes from one, definitely the protagonist needs to be interviewed if he or she is still alive. So one has to think about what story am I telling and what's the best source of that information. So if I'm telling the story of Komi Naidu and he's still alive and I can get to him, well, definitely you should interview the protagonist. And then, yeah, depending what else you want to put in that case. So if you want to have the history of the company, and you're not going to get that information from the protagonist, but rather from a managerial team or maybe it's left the company. Now you want to tell the story of the social enterprise nowadays, not led by the founder. Then you'll have to interview these managers. And then there's a lot of secondary data as well that goes into the case. So I would not dare give you a number, but rather make you think about what information you want to put in the case and what's the best source for that information.
If I can jump in there, and I agree with Alex, and I see Celine has also put this very nicely, is that it's, obviously it depends on the case, the number of people you interview, but cases can also be drawn from secondary data. I don't advise it, and I will bounce to Juliet now. I see cases that are drawn from secondary data take longer to publish, and I think they're actually harder to write and to do because you don't have a feel for the person. But cases can be written from secondary data if you've got sufficient access to data. We also avoid cases being anonymous, but again, there are ways around it depending on what you're talking about. So if it's highly controversial around ethics, for example, people may request to be kept anonymous, or you might want to create change the name of the organization, for example. But from my perspective, that requires a good reason. The case must be real. It can't be made up. And so it's really important to make sure that you've got the information that allows you to tell the story of the case so that students can understand it. Juliet?
Yeah, so I will go through this a little bit more in my presentation shortly, but I'd completely agree that the preference would be to use primary data if you can, and that tends to be because the case itself is more compelling. If you have interviews with the central protagonist, for example, you tend to have a more compelling case as a result of that, and the review process is quicker. So we all know that people want to get their research published quickly, so in the interest of doing that, we would recommend primary data if you can.
Juliet, are you tackling permissions? I see a question from Melandi here in the chat. I'm not sure if you.
Yes, so I don't know if I cover it in my presentation, but just to say, yes, we can. Well, we require a consent to publish form that goes alongside the case. So that has to be from the company that the teaching case is written about. So Karen had made the point around us being able to anonymize in some cases, but we would still require a consent to publish form to show that the company, even if they're being anonymized, is aware that you're writing the case and is given consent to do that. So we can't accept the case unless you have a consent to publish form that goes alongside it. I think that was it.
All right, any more questions, or shall we carry on for a bit more? Okay, anything on YouTube? No. Okay. Right, let me carry on from my side. Yeah, here we go. I've got a bunch of Zoom windows getting in my view, but all right. How do I move these? I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Great. So I'm going to talk about bringing theory into the case, because it's important to know that through a teaching case, so once again, the purpose of this document is to help you in teaching in the classroom. So your audience is students, and you as an instructor, you want to help students to learn about theory as well by using the case. So the case is not just to learn about a certain real life example of social entrepreneurship or marketing or whatever might be the case, but it's also a tool for us to learn through the case about theory. So where does theory come into the case? Well, we should focus on the learning outcomes here. So once again, we should write the case with the student in mind and what we want them to learn. And in these 3 or 4 or more learning outcomes, we basically spell out what students should know or be able to do at the end of the case study exercise. And so it's one important learning outcome has to do with the application of theory to the case. So we might have learning outcomes where, we just want them to to be able to take a decision going forward for this protagonist and so on. But I would say that one or two of these learning outcomes will contain theory, and it's a way for us to present theory in a way that relates to real life scenarios. So back to Bloom's taxonomy, and I know we prepared this for a wide audience, so I hope I'm not boring those who are very well versed in Bloom's taxonomy. But one way of writing learning outcomes that are very specific is to use Bloom's taxonomy, which helps you to basically answer the question, at which academic level am I pitching my case? So am I speaking to an undergraduate audience, a postgraduate audience in the first years? So in South Africa, we'll speak of final year undergrad students or honors students, or is it for MBAs or executive education? So, and where can we bring in theory? So I would say at an undergraduate level, we can already bring in theory to help students understand what is happening in the case. So to understand facts, behaviors, and the like. So I could bring in theory, for example, to understand the process that an entrepreneur has gone through, from opportunity identification to evaluation and then exploitation. So in the case, all of this is sort of mentioned at different points, but through the application of the entrepreneurial process, I help students to sort of sift through all that data and make sense of what has been happening by applying a certain theoretical framework. Or we can bring in theory when we try to apply a theoretical lens to the case, or otherwise analyze the case through using a theoretical tool. So for example, I could apply the theory of change to a specific case and sort of, once again, also unbundle all the information that I have in the case and identify what are the inputs of a certain social entrepreneurial venture, all the way to the impact. So how is this impact created? What outcomes does it create? Which outputs lead to that outcome, and so on. So it can help me sort of make sense of the case. Or at a more advanced postgraduate level, I could use it to evaluate or discuss the case and even create new knowledge using theory. So for example, I could use the funding spectrum to evaluate whether a social enterprise is a good blend of income types. Or I could even use the social business model canvas to do an analysis of their model and then create an improvement of their business model towards a more sustainable one. So the answer to that question is really, we have theory in the case for theory application, and I use application as a broader term than what you see in Bloom's taxonomy, but basically anything from the understanding activity or the way to creating could have theory come in and aid that specific learning outcome. So here I took from one case that we've published, just to show you how theory comes through in the teaching notes. So here we're at the bottom of the case. So once the case is ended, and it usually ends with this open-ended question, what should we do next? Basically, we've got the teaching note, and the teaching note has a number of components. One of them is precisely the learning objectives very early in that teaching note. And the whole case study is basically built and written with these learning objectives in mind. So later on, you'll have the teaching plan where you say, well, that's what you could do in 90 minutes. You give an introduction, you divide people in groups. You could have this brainstorming activity. You could have students present on the board and so on and so forth, all the way to the end of that 90th minute, for example. And then you've got assignment questions where you basically can give these questions for homework or do them in the classroom environment. But basically the teaching note and the case, which reflects the teaching note, is built with the learning objectives in mind. And we ask ourselves, what do we want students to learn through this case? And once again, we want to learn through the case and not just about the case. So, for example, here in the teaching objectives, the one I highlighted says successfully identify important stakeholders and understand the importance of the ecosystem in which the social enterprise is operating. So as we will see later, this question will borrow from stakeholder theory to sort of map the stakeholders that are applicable, the stakeholders of this social enterprise. We also see theory in the case narrative, not explicitly. What I mean by this is when we write a case, we sort of have to have in mind what are the theories that are more suited to the case and that I want to bring out in the teaching notes. So I'm saying this because the facts that I choose to mention will have to speak to this theory that I want to use, be it stakeholder theory or the theory of change or whatever might be the case. So it cannot be that in the case I cannot find information or I cannot see the elements of the theory in seed form. I need to be able to have students find this information and sort of use the theory to interpret the case. So in this assignment question that we saw, which requires students to map the stakeholders, and here we see suppliers, the government, and so on. Well, of course, those need to be have been mentioned in the case in some form or other, or at least be kind of implicit, so that we can sort of draw them out of the case using the theory. And then finally, in the assignment questions and the analysis. So, for example, here we have this question: using stakeholder theory, map out the various stakeholders and their potential roles in supporting, constraining the growth projects of the social enterprise. So this is where the instructor leads the students to learn about theory through its application to the case. And we need, once again, to keep in mind Bloom's taxonomy and see at what level of application do I want students to work. So is it just using theory to understand? Do I want them to do an analysis? Do I want them to create new contents and even propose a way forward to this entrepreneur or manager? So in this question, well, we see the theory is mentioned in the question. Then usually the theory from a writing point of view, the author needs to explain the theory a little bit for the instructor to know about it. Even though we have a list of required readings or suggested readings where they can go and read more about the theory, I need to sort of give a brief explanation of the theory, and then I need to tell the instructor how I, as an author, see this theory being applied. So what is the model answer for this specific theory application? Now, it's a case and it can be flexible, you know, when with a case, you never have the right solution when it comes to a managerial decision, but when it comes to theory application, well, most likely this model answer is pretty much the one correct answer, because I'm the one who brought in the theory, I'm the one who wrote the case, and most likely this answer is good for anybody. There might be other interpretations or applications of the theory, and sometimes these come through in the classroom when students can even surprise us in a way. No, why can you mute yourself? Thanks. All right, so in a nutshell, I'd say, well, we bring the theory into the case first in the story, and I would advise you first, you know, to write the story drafts of this protagonist, of his journey or her journey, where they got to, of the company and so on, and before you write out a fully fledged case. And then at that point is where you can start thinking about, well, what could be the learning outcomes in this case? What could students learn from this case? And one of those learning outcomes, one or two, could speak to theory. So what theories would go well with this case and could be applied to, for example, identify the motivations behind the social entrepreneurial behavior, or map out the impact of the social enterprise, or do social impact measurement, and so on and so forth. And then in the assignment questions as well. So analyzing the questions as thoroughly as possible before you submit the case for publications, and always keeping the students in mind. So they're the ones who need to learn about the theory. So we tend to sometimes write the teaching note very instructor-centered. So sort of like, what are the things I could do to fill up the time? That's not ideal. We want to think about what students can learn through the case and make that the focus of your teaching note and how to bring theory into the case. And finally, a few things about the research behind the case. So in the teaching note, there is a little section on the research that was done. Once again, a case is not a research piece of work, but it has research behind it. So here they say a qualitative research design methodology based on primary and secondary data was used in this case study. A semi-structured in-depth interview was conducted with the founder of GTE College, and a site visit of the Dar es Salaam office was conducted, and then secondary data and so on and so forth. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity. For example, you've done your PhD, you've interviewed, maybe you've done 8 case studies, 8 organizations that you've gone into, where you were trying to study, advance the field, extend the theory, come up with theory from the ground up. So forget about that theory for now, but think about, well, from these interviews, is there a story I can tell? Is there a story that would be useful for students to learn about and then later to learn theory from? And so we can maybe choose one of those organizations that for you is an epitome of social enterprise or a case of internationalization, whatever might be the case. And then you can start writing that up in a draft form. Pulling it all together, see how it flows, ask yourself, is there a protagonist? Is there a managerial dilemma that is coming through? If not, can there be one? Was it my way of writing it that is not making it come through, or is it because there is none? Anyway, and once that's sorted, if you have a strong story with a protagonist and a dilemma, then you can look also for secondary sources to back up the story. So giving a bit of background on the country, on the industry, competition, the company itself, and so on. So there is usually a bit of primary data, so the ability to interview the protagonist or the people that are involved in this company or activity. So we can do interviews, focus groups, field observations, and so on. And once again, perhaps you've already done these in your research, and you were, I don't know, we were doing a study applying stakeholder theory, and there is quite a bit of information that is sort of coming through in the interviews that maybe has nothing to do with your PhD, but it is there, it has been collected. The protagonist has told you her story. That has no impact on your research publication. It will not go in there because that's a journal article, but you can bring it into a case definitely. So you can think about, well, what kind of information do I have that I can make use of? And do I need a follow-up interview to finish up the case, or all I need to do is actually to ask for permission to publish a case and mention this person's company and even the name, so that I can publish a case. And then the secondary data. I think good cases have a bit of socioeconomic background, a bit of information about the industry, the competition, company data, so that, you know, we can almost start like in a funnel. Before we go into the protagonist, we can give a bit of background on, say, Tanzania, the industry in which the social enterprise is playing, information about competition and so on. And this will aid students to make decisions and to analyze the case. So here the context is very important, because not only will this case maybe be used in a different continent, but also across countries. We need to know, we can't make assumptions. We need to know that the social enterprise was set up this way, was facing these institutional barriers in the specific context, and so on. Well, I'd like to stop there and see if there are any questions, because that's was my broad level overview of bringing theory into the case and speaking a little bit about the research opportunity. Is everyone falling asleep?
No, sorry, Alex, I'm typing and trying to scroll at the same time. So my apologies, you caught me on the ball there. Selena was mentioning that she has some case ideas in Uganda. Selena, I don't know if you want to chat about that quickly.
Yes, we've had a partnership at UNSW with the university in Gulu, and a number of the students came and did my social enterprise course and then went back and founded some social enterprises. So I've got some very early stage social enterprises in Uganda, which I think would make great case studies. So if anyone's interested, I can't really write those case studies because I'm involved in an advisory board capacity for most of those startups. But I think that'd be quite interesting for anyone who's wanting to write about that phase of social enterprise.
Thanks. That's really exciting to hear these opportunities coming up already. I see that there's a hand up. Anna Mariska, do you want to jump in?
Yes. Hi there. Thank you very much. Everyone's doing a fantastic job. It's really valuable and interesting. I'm wondering if maybe you can help me dispel a couple of myths that I have around case writing that I've adopted from senior scholars. And that is, well, you write a case, you start writing cases when you're out to pasture, and quote unquote, and then my supervisor has told me that in the UK, cases aren't really used and encouraged. And both of these myths are concerning for me because I very much enjoy storytelling and could see case writing being a wonderful outlet. If I'm not writing up ethnography research, that cases will give me a chance to still nurture that creative storytelling writing side. I did write one case for my MBA and submitted it to NACRA, and that I believe helped me get into my PhD. So I very much look forward to continuing that, but I have these two myths that kind of keep it on a shelf.
I guess I can probably speak from the UK perspective and from a publisher's perspective. So both the Emerging Markets Case Studies Collection and the Case Journal are ranked in Scopus. So I know that's generally globally recognised as a quality criteria. And I know there's certain parts of the world where teaching cases aren't necessarily recognised in the same way that academic articles are. But as I said earlier, I think the tide is turning. I think actually the fact that there is this real impact that you can see in the writing of the case and the practical application of the case, when you think about the ref and they have sort of the impact side of the ref now within the UK, I think those types of things are now more considered than they would have been previously. But I do understand there's always risk associated with publishing in a non-traditional way. I just hope that we're starting to see the landscape shift a bit, because I think actually in some ways there's more skill required to write a teaching case than an academic article. It's a very different way of writing, but really rewarding for those that are using it in the classroom. I don't know if Karen or Alex has anything to add on that.
Well, I'm very intrigued by the out to pasture phrase. But in a way, my experience was the opposite. So I was staff at a university and wanted to teach more, and teaching cases were my way of learning how to teach the subject that I knew something about. And also just to really be introduced to academic writing in a way that I could do it in a way that was kind of on my terms, rather than writing a thesis or a dissertation, which obviously, as you know, isn't always on your terms. So I do think it's an important, a bit like social entrepreneurship. I really like teaching cases because it's a bridge, and it brings the value of these bridging worlds. It brings practice into the classroom, but it still brings the academic rigor with it. And so I think this is why there's this very natural affinity between teaching cases and the field of social entrepreneurship, is because it's a connector. And as Juliet says so well, it's an accessible connector. And again, I think that's also at the heart of social entrepreneurship teaching. So both in the social entrepreneurship classroom, but also more widely, I think teaching cases are fantastic. But I also think if you want to strengthen your writing skills, if you want to strengthen your teaching skills, they're an important place to play in a very, and in a community that cares, right? So, I mean, I don't want to go on too much about it, but I know with the Emerald Emerging Markets, with the reviewers that I work with, there's a very strong focus on constructive, helpful feedback to improve your writing. And I don't think you get that in the journal article reviews that I've certainly received. So I don't know if that helps.
I guess on a more practical note as well, we have found that teaching cases have translated very well to the online learning and teaching space in the way that more traditional academic teaching hasn't necessarily. So we've had really, really positive feedback to support that over the last 18 months.
Thank you. That's great.
I'm not seeing any more questions coming through. So Alex, bouncing back to you in terms of what's going on in the chat, unless I've missed something. I think good.
No, that's all. I don't know if Juliet wants to continue, and then we can take questions at the end.
Let me try and get my presentation up. Okay, hang on, I just need to get back to the beginning. Can everyone see my slides? Yeah. Okay, so now I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking in a bit more detail about the process of publishing cases, and specifically publishing cases with Emerald, because I hope that after this session you will all submit to one of our case collections. So first of all, I just wanted to follow up from the excellent advice that we've already had from Karen and Alex. So what I've done is I've gathered some top tips from some of our case editors and some of our case associate editors, just in terms of what they generally see with case submissions and the feedback that they would give through the submission process. So first of all, I've got a bit of feedback, excuse me, from Rebecca Morris. She is the editor-in-chief of the Case Journal. And I think something that's incredibly important when you're thinking about case writing is to test the cases in the classroom before you submit them for publication. And I don't think that necessarily is something that everyone considers before they submit a case for publication. So first of all, ask a colleague to observe you teach the case. Get them to record what you say so that you can understand how you might better explain your ideas to your students. And that's going to really help when you think about the construction of the teaching notes. Get peers to highlight moments when your class was confused, and that also relates to making sure that the case and the teaching note are aligned. It's surprising how often they're not. And then ask yourself, could any teacher teach this case in the classroom? What we're increasingly seeing with compact cases in particular, which are short cases which tend to be less than 200 words, is that often teachers will give those cases to their students at the beginning of a lesson. The students will read them in the session itself, and then they will immediately go on to teach in the classroom because they're much shorter and accessible. And that's particularly for undergraduate teaching. But I interviewed a case teacher recently, and she said she finds cases particularly useful, particularly compact cases, when she's not able to teach her class and she has to get someone in to teach her class. She can give the cases as a resource. So it needs to be really easy to understand and translate into the classroom. So some feedback from the wonderful Karen, who's already spoken to us today. This has in her position as an associate editor for the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. As we've already noted, she mentions that primary data tends to make cases stronger and speeds up the review process. I think interviews in particular, because you get a much better sense of the case protagonist. Strong cases have a central character facing a dilemma. So this dilemma is the really important part of the case because it gives, I guess it gives structure to the case, and it helps students to understand what the discussion topics are going to be. Explain your context. So it's important to note that your case might be taught in different countries, different parts of the world. So there needs to be good understanding behind the case. And actually, I think this is great advice. Don't think of it as a teaching, but rather learning outcomes. So what are the students going to get as a result of learning that case and using that case in the classroom? And then to echo Karen's point, she's already mentioned this, but the peer review process for cases, it can go through several rounds of review. For standard academic articles, you may expect to see 2 or 3 rounds of review. Within the emerging markets case studies collection, sometimes we go 3, 4, 5 rounds of review, and that's really because the reviewers and the associate editors are working really hard to get that case to a point where it can be published. It's a really supportive community, but it is really important that you take that feedback on board. If you get a major revision request, you do need to make substantial changes to that case before you resubmit. So really look at the feedback that you're getting, because it is there to help you. But I do understand that the review process is frustrating and can take longer than you would like it to take. So, I take that as a publisher. So some feedback from Virginia Bodalika. She's one of the associate editors for EMCS based in the Middle East. So 3 common errors: lack of clarity about the theoretical frameworks that sit around the case. So Alex talked about that during his presentation. A disconnect, as I've mentioned, between learning objectives and the questions that are proposed by the authors. And then this lack of decision focus and, the fact that if there's a case protagonist facing a dilemma, you need to have something to hook the reader, and you need to think about ways that the reader can find innovative solutions to the problem or the dilemma. And that would be supported through the questions and answers for the teacher in the teaching notes. And then finally, Andre Lopez Fernandez, who's one of our associate editors based in Latin America. She said some of the most common mistakes are lack of clarity on the dilemma. So that reflects what Virginia has said. Disassociation of the case and the teaching note content. Again, you wouldn't think that would happen, but actually it does happen quite consistently. And this lack of a theoretical foundation. So that's a really important part. And to go back to Selena's earlier point, cases are academic pieces of work. They are academic in their focus, and they do have a bit of theoretical framework that sits behind them, so that it's important that that appears in the case and the teaching notes. So I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. So I've included a link here. All of these are hyperlinked, and I'll share my slides in the chat after this presentation. But it's a collection that supports case writers from regions in emerging markets. We have a huge number of cases published out of Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, India, Latin America. We actually have some Spanish cases that we published a couple of years ago, if anyone is a Spanish speaker. And all of the cases have associated teaching notes. So it's a really fantastic collection. It's been growing really considerably over the last few years. We're always looking for new reviewers. So if you're new to case writing, but you're interested in case writing, I would really encourage you to get in touch and register as a reviewer, because that gives you a really good sense of what we're looking for in case writing and just gives you that practical application. So more information on author guidelines, and that has more information on the case and teaching note requirements, can be found in the link below. And if you're interested in submitting your case after this session, I've also included a link to the submission page. In terms of subject coverage, it's largely subjects that map to the MBA curriculum. So I've listed them here. 2 areas that aren't specifically listed, but we're going to be adding as subject filters are leadership and business ethics. And we do find within the learning objectives and the teaching note itself that people often specify that cases can be taught on more than one course. So we're increasingly trying to tag our cases so that they appear under more than one subject heading. And then just to give you a little bit more information about the social enterprise in Africa special issue that we've been working with ANSES on. So it was launched in partnership with ANSES, and it's supporting our strategy to publish more cases on social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. We found from doing some submissions analysis and analysis of competitor case providers, so Harvard, the Case Center, it's a growing area for case writing. So we're increasingly trying to have more content within our case collections on this topic. There is a prize, or there was a prize associated with the special issue. We have a number of case competitions that have prizes associated with them. So I've included a link in a later slide to our cases competition program. So if you are interested, as well as improving your case writing skills, you can also win some money. So what more incentive do you need? And also published authors for this special issue will receive ANSES membership, and they get advanced sub-editing on their published cases to improve the English language. We've got 6 cases now published and 4 accepted. So it's a fairly bumper special issue. We're really pleased with that. So it shows there's a lot of interest in this area. And we'll compile those into a virtual issue and we'll promote that. And actually for this session, I have set up free access to the case below, which features within the special issue. So I'm hoping if you click on that link, the case should be freely accessible. In terms of access to cases, just to flag that if you want access to the teaching note, you have to contact us separately because we don't want all of the students that might be using the case in the classroom to have access to the really valuable teaching notes. So we have a process whereby when libraries sign up to our case content, they provide a list of faculty faculty email addresses, and those faculty will get access to the teaching notes. But hopefully that case should be freely available. So if you click on that and you can't get to it for any reason, I've included my email address in the deck and you can contact me directly and I'll follow up on your behalf. So this is the list of the cases that have already published in the special issue. Using the case in the classroom to have access to the I'm getting a bit of teaching notes. So we have a process whereby when libraries sign up to our case content, can everyone else hear that? A list of faculty faculty email addresses, and those faculty will get access to the teaching notes. But hopefully that case will be available. Yeah. So
you need to reduce the volume from your YouTube channel.
I've included my email address in the deck. I don't think I have YouTube open.
You need to silence your YouTube.
This is the list of the cases. Oh,
it was a newcomer.
Can you still hear me?
Okay, thank you.
Now perfect.
Yep. Okay, great. So yep, all of those are linked out. So you won't be able to access all of the full cases for those, but that will take you to the abstract if you're wanting to go and have a look. But you can see a really interesting breakdown of cases within that special issue. And we hope to have all of those published by the end of the year. Also, just to flag, we have a live competition with the African Association of Business Schools, and that's a case writing competition. So we would encourage you to submit your case to the competition for next year. The categories are best case proposal, and we now have a teaching impact award as well. And for those of you that are new to case writing, I think the best case proposal is particularly interesting because the submissions don't need to be a fully developed case. It's just a proposal of what the case might look like. And if you win the best case proposal category, you get 2 hour-long mentoring sessions on your proposal with a view to getting your case to a point at which it's ready to submit. So it's a really supportive competition process, and that really helps, I think, for people who are new to case writing. So I've included a link to that competition as well. And then finally, I want to leave some time for questions at the end, so I'll try and whiz through this. But as I've mentioned in the chat, we have what we call the Emerald Cases Hub. So there's a link here, the link's in the chat as well, but it's a free online multimedia resource for all case writers, case teachers, and case learners. And there's a huge amount of interactive content on there. There's a short video here. I'm not going to play it because I'm just worried the technology is not going to work, but I'll share the deck and you can view that after this session. But within it, we have modules on writing with case studies, learning with case studies, and teaching with case studies. They all have short videos that sit within each section, and you can also make notes as you go and then download the notes that sit alongside those modules so that you have notes ready to go for when you've completed each module. We also have a useful resources section within the Emerald Cases Hub. As you can see, sorry, this is the writing a case study module. Sorry, I've skipped to the next slide, but this is how it's broken down. And so you can see each one has a number of videos within it. And I'm hoping, yeah, within the Cases Hub, someone asked this question in the chat. We also have a sample cases section. So once you've registered an account, if you go to the library, there's a useful resources section. You can click on sample cases and teaching notes, and we have a sample case and teaching note 1 from the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, and that's building the Bright Rock brand. That's actually written by Michael Goldman, who's the editor of the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. And we also have a sample case and teaching note, which is a compact case, which is written by the Case Journal editor, Rebecca Morris. And we have a Spanish language case, which is freely available as well, if anyone's interested in that. And a little bit more information. All of the webinars are promoting our competitions program. So a really useful resource if you want to go away and start writing a case, but you still have further questions that we haven't been able to cover today. So I think that's it from me. So hopefully I'll stop sharing, but I've included my email address here. I would encourage you to follow us on Twitter as well. But if you have any questions, I'm hoping we've now got a little bit of time before we finish the session. I can't seem to escape my presentation though. Hang on. Oh, there we go.
Great, thank you very much, Juliet. I think that's very informative for all our audience and thinking a little bit more about publishing in the near future. So there were some questions in the meantime. Karen, did you?
Yeah, so I've got one from Melinda who says, as the author of a case, can you freely use or teach this case in any institution throughout your life, or are there certain user rights after it's published with an outlet?
So no, if you've published a case with us, you have full access to use that case in a teaching environment, however you see fit. So you have free reign over using your own case. No limits there.
Perfect. Actually, I don't know why I'm reading these out. If folk want to put their cameras on and ask these questions, Nielke, do you want to ask your question on the geographic limitation of the cases in writing them?
Yes, I will ask my question, but I won't switch on my camera because my hairstyle has changed in the meantime. It got very hot in Pretoria suddenly. Yes, I was just concerned about the cultural and geographic background of some cases. I have found in the past that it was very difficult to translate cases, for instance, from America to the South African student audience, where they would just, write down the answers blithely because, it's what they read in the textbook. But there's no real understanding of the situation because the legislation and the situation in South Africa is completely different. And I assume that if I write a case about the South African cultural and economic and social environment, it would be difficult for a student in a developed world to completely understand the background against which you write, especially if you're writing about social entrepreneurship and the socio-economic problems that we have in South Africa or in any other developing country. And how easy or difficult it would be to translate and to transfer the content and the knowledge from these cases across different cultures and contexts.
Do you want me to take that?
I think
I have a barking.
It may have related to the feedback that I included from you, Karen. I think we've lost Karen. While we're just waiting for Karen to come back, I think just from my perspective, I think, we want people to be able to make the cases translatable as far as possible. But what we also do in terms of the cases platform, people can filter the cases by region. So often people would select the cases that they're interested as they pertain to particular parts of the world. So you can filter by country. And so it may be that you don't need to always kind of make it translatable. But I think, Karen, that related to your feedback. So I'm hoping the barking has stopped and we can have my
I'm so sorry. No, it's a classic example of great timing. So I hear what you're saying, because I appreciate that one of the reasons we push for cases to be submitted from different contexts is so that we can encourage teaching of different contexts. I sometimes think the resistance to learning from different contexts is because people are a bit tired, or students just get a bit fed up with the case from Harvard, which isn't always translated or translatable into, say, the South African environment. But having said that, I do think it is really important to teach cases from different country contexts, particularly if we're trying to understand very difficult concepts, because what might work as a solution in a developed country context, for example, may have more, the students may need to consider more things if they're opening a business in an emerging market context. So I think I take the different points, and I think they're all equally valid. A lot of it is based on your assessment of your students, your wider curriculum focus. But I have to say that I really appreciate having the opportunity to draw from different country contexts. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to use different cases from different country contexts in the classroom, because social entrepreneurship can mean so many different things depending on where the context is. So I think a lot of this is also go with your gut feel, follow your nose. But I like the fact that we are really building a base of cases, particularly from the African contexts, which, you know, we don't often hear from. So I think that is important. Don't think I've answered your question other than to.
I think you did, and as you say, some of the underlying theory is universal. It's just that when you start talking about the problem that the protagonist is facing, for instance, sometimes people will find that these problems are very raw and close to the bone in developing countries. And when you talk about problems in the developed world, the students in a developing country sit and look at you and they go like, but that's not a problem. They must come here and we'll show them what the problem is. But the problems are very real to the people that are living in that context. And, you know, it's just sometimes difficult to translate if people don't have a broad general knowledge. And when I say people, I mean students, don't yet have a very broad general knowledge of the situations in the different countries, because it's difficult enough to get them to read the news about what's happening in their own country, but to get them to have a general knowledge about what's happening in other countries, that is sometimes a challenge, so that they can understand the context of that case that you are discussing now. So sometimes you actually have to start with a history lesson before you can discuss the case.
Yeah, and just to agree with you, I think that's also what makes teaching cases from different contexts so important, because you're encouraging students to see the world outside of their normal. What we do, every teaching note will have an additional material section also, where videos are recommended, photographs, or, just additional, so that the lecturer can draw on a lot of different materials to help paint that picture. But that picture does need to be painted, and that is an important part of the teaching process. Just quickly, I know we've had a discussion in the chat, but about describing your normal. But in my first teaching case, I wrote about apartheid and working in townships. And my first review of feedback was like, you need to explain these concepts, because you can't assume that people know what a township is or that they know what apartheid is. So our South African normal does need explanations, but I hope that provides some background. Alex, Juliet, I'm going to bounce back to you because I've now lost track of the chat.
There was just someone reminding me that I said I'd share my slides, which I have now done. So sorry about that. And I've also included a link to our competitions program. I also just wanted to flag a competition that I hadn't mentioned in the slides, but people may be interested in. It's closed for this year, but we will run again for next year, and it's called the Case for Women. So we worked in partnership with an organisation for the Case for Women, who did some research which showed that in the cases they analysed, and this was from the Case Centre, they found that only 4% of cases featured a female case protagonist that spoke to another woman about the business. So females were unbelievably underrepresented in case writing, and that doesn't necessarily represent the breakdown of students on MBA programs. So we introduced a competition to try and redress that balance, and we run it annually. So it has a monetary prize associated with it, but more importantly, it's increasing the number of cases that we have with female case protagonists. So if you go to our competitions page, you can find more information about that competition.
So it was a question for the ANSI's website and for the web address in the chat.
Okay, ANSI's.org.
Okay. I think we've answered all the questions. Are there any other questions to run through?
I don't think so.
No, YouTube, I was checking. We just had one question that I already shared before. So in YouTube, no more questions. And we have still approximately 10 minutes because we are dealing with another conference here. So you have 10 minutes, maybe if anybody wants to ask anything else.
Hung has got a hand up. Hung, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to add a comment, not a question. This is relating to the previous question about teaching the developing countries case study for developed country students. I think I am a researcher from developing countries. So the most important point that is you show them that you really understand it inside the case, and show them the differences between a point which is maybe very normal in developed country, but totally special and abnormal in developing countries. So making the comparison right at the beginning, because, by example, I'm doing research on healthcare. The healthcare in developing countries is totally terrible, by example, compared to some developed country. So the comparison is very important.
And there's a question from Deirdre from Royan, which I forgot, I saw it in the chat around publishing. Deirdre, do you want to ask that?
Hi, Karen. Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I just want to know, Alex, perhaps you would know best as well. If we are writing a case, would this be added to our outputs, you understand? Or is writing a case for the good of the academia? Or how did you experience it?
Well, it's always good to check with your institution, but at least in South Africa, the Emerald, so the specific publishing outlet, Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies, is an accredited journal or output. You will find it in the list of the HET accredited journal. It's a Scopus, indexed by Scopus, so it is an accredited publication. So, but then, you know, of course, you won't get citations or things like that, but it does count as an output. So I think it gives you credit. Always good to double check with your institution, because it is a different kind of outlet, and you know, maybe your department has different rules around that. But yeah, on paper, it is an accredited journal.
And there's a great question that's come through. Can anyone write a case? Sanele, thank you. Yes, anyone can write a case. That's one of the great things about it, is that it's accessible. But we do recommend that you, especially if you're new to case writing, partner with someone, because it requires two very distinct writing styles, the storytelling and the theoretical side. So we see lots of very different people writing cases, and they're not all academics. Juliet, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just actually to pick up on your point about the North American Case Writing Association conference, Karen. So a lot of the case conferences that run annually have, I know there's one at the Case Association's conference called the Case Hackathon. And so they're short, very kind of focused sessions where you can present a case or bring a case along. And it's a workshop setting where you can improve the quality of your case in a supportive environment, so with other case writers. So if you're looking at some of these big case conferences, do look out for these smaller sessions that they run for aspiring case writers, because that will help you to nurture your case writing in a supportive environment, but with a view to ideally your case being ready for publication by the end of those sessions. So I presume NACRA may be running something similar, but I'd need to look at the lineup of the sessions. Karen, you may know more.
But when I started off in case writing, I was very lucky to get a fellowship through NACRA, and that was incredibly helpful just to really orientate around the case field. So the Paul R. Lawrence Fellowship is run through them, and so I know them well, but get involved. It's a great community, the case writing community, and I think you'll find a lot of support within it, whichever direction you decide to take.
And NACRA is coming up in a couple of weeks, isn't it? And it's quite cheap to attend virtually, so probably still worth signing up if people are interested.
Perfect. Alex, I think our time is ticking.
Yeah, and it's always good to have a bit of buffer time for those who are in the EMES conference and need to run to the next meeting or their tea time. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here, all this wonderful audience and all your questions. And then I'd like to thank Juliet for being part of this webinar and speaking from a publisher's point of view. I want to thank Tamara from EMES for making this possible and hosting us, making us comfortable. And also thank you, Karen, for all your wonderful insights. So I wish you all a wonderful next hour of the day, whatever it is, if it's morning or evening or night. And see you for our next Answers event, which we'll communicate soon. Have a lovely one. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. Big regards from Teruel and from our conference. We send you big hug and thank you. You've been wonderful. Hope to see you in other sessions where you join us online. Okay, big hug from Spain.
Bye. Bye, Tamara.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.